Hi there, I'm your host, John Iveson. I'm joined as usual by Marcella Monroe, who is a principal at Macmillan Vantage, and Andrew Balfour, who is managing partner at Rubicon Strategies. So what do we know? Well, one thing I know is that you should not go out on the road for 2 weeks without underwear. And I have just found out that, I did find out that I didn't have any underwear, and a very kind Liberal sorted the situation out by taking me to the nearest Walmart. So now my suitcase is bulging with cheap underwear. What else do we know? Well, what I think I know is that the Liberals were in free fall earlier in this campaign. They hit the gun control message, which I think arrested that decline. They were having some success in Quebec. I think that has probably come to an end with the English language debate, where the moderator insulted the whole of Quebec, and I think the Bloc rallied around that message. And now we're seeing Justin Trudeau unabashedly appealing to progressive voters, asking them to come over and ensure that a Conservative government doesn't come to pass. We were in Vancouver yesterday. Justin Trudeau was with Andrew Weaver, the former BC Green leader and climate scientist, who said that the Liberal climate plan was the plan of his dreams. So that's currently where we are. The NDP vote has softened, I'm being told by other parties, and yet it's still above 20% or around 20%, which is pretty good historically for the NDP. So Marcella, what do you think? Do you think that this is going to take off again for the Liberals? They just pull all these progressive voters over?
Well, as you said, the NDP vote hasn't really moved this campaign. It's still around 20%. But again, we have to remember that number is slightly inflated because it's a three-way tie in British Columbia, which is the third largest electoral prize, right? So does it work in Ontario, where it historically has worked, this Pied Piper, come home progressives and save us from the Conservative government? I mean, it usually does. And so if there's a softening NDP vote in Ontario, then yeah, it may be enough to get the Liberals over the top. But right now, I mean, there hasn't been any tremendous shift. You know, the Liberals have regained their version of the strength. The Conservatives have slightly been dampened, but I don't know. I think it's going to be a minority government, and right now I couldn't say whether it's blue or red.
Andrew?
I'm still saying that it's going to be red. I think that there's still several days to go. There's still going to be some movement. I thought it was quite a coup for the Liberals to have Andrew Weaver out there. I mean, I don't think that means much to many people outside of British Columbia, but I think that in British Columbia and in the climate environmental world, that's a big thing, and him endorsing the Prime Minister's plan is significant. I don't know if that moves that many votes, but you can tell just by seeing things on social media, et cetera, that Liberal candidates in British Columbia are certainly posting about that and making sure it's known. So clearly, some of the people in really tight fights think that's a big deal.
We were in British Columbia, and they had a couple of rallies that were pretty flat. A lot of, they draw these circles for people to stand in. There were a lot of empty circles. It doesn't strike me that there's massive enthusiasm for the Liberals, and that I think must be a concern to them right across the country. I mean, people are still bitching about the fact we're even in an election. Like, cab driver from Pearson last night was upset about it. The waiter in the bar downstairs was upset about it. I mean, this is something that people bring up without being prompted. And that, I think, must have an impact on election day, because there does seem to be an enthusiasm gap for Liberals, which is not there for New Democrats or for Conservatives, right, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I think the enthusiasm gap is exactly what the Liberals' main challenge is. I mean, look, I don't see any other leader really setting the campaign on fire with the enthusiasm right now. It might be just that voters are kind of a pox on all your houses, and trying to get through this fall is hard enough. But that being said, the Liberals do have, I think, a particular challenge. And, I've been in these cases before, running municipal campaigns in Vancouver. And so what do you do down the stretch? Well, for the last few days, we made a big splash back in 2014 to basically make sure our voters got the message that we were in trouble if they didn't get more enthusiastic and get to the polls. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like that from the Liberals in the days ahead, just a shock to the system to ensure that their voters are motivated to go vote.
I mean, I sticking with you on this, because I thought it was interesting that Judd Meat in the last day or so has been talking about that there is a cost to voting Liberal. And, the inflation numbers came out today. They were pretty awful. I think people expected them to be awful because this is the sort of economy settling itself after COVID, and demand was depressed last year. But, the price of everything's going up. Climate change.
Do most people know what inflation is?
Well, they know when it costs them more to get gas in their car, for sure. And there is a sense that the Liberals didn't meet the targets, the climate targets that they put out in the first place. Then they raised the ambition on those targets, and they clearly haven't achieved much in the last. In fact, it was the NDP were pointing out that of all the G7 countries, Canada's got the worst record in the period 2016 to 2019. So, I think that in 2019 there was a pushback. There wasn't a pushback from the NDP. There does seem to be one, a concerted one this time. Andrew, no?
Well, this afternoon, or I should say this morning, when I was coming in from Pearson into downtown Toronto, the Conservatives have purchased very large billboard ads about this inflation. Granted, this is for the commuters, but in the 416, they don't have a chance anywhere. And yeah, I kind of agree with you, but if the NDP were really making headway, then why are their numbers going down right now?
Well, I don't think anybody expects them to make headway. If they come in at 20%, they'd be delighted, I'm sure. What about the
Right, but they're not at 20%
well,
anymore.
Depends who you talk to. Put it that way. I talk to some of the parties, and I trust their numbers better than any of the public polls. Marcella, about Conservatives, they seem to be, I think I used the word becalmed. They don't seem to be going anywhere. They don't seem to have a second act. They obviously poured everything into getting back in the race after having a pretty lousy summer, and it doesn't seem to have shifted from where they got to.
No, look, the gun issue didn't help them. They never kind of came out of that properly. I think there's been, if you look on social media, I think there's been a quote unquote movement of women, both Liberal and Democrat, progressive women that have been raising the childcare issue again quite loudly, and that's been hitting the news locally in a lot of places. So that's probably not that helpful for them. But listen, the thing that we always have to remember, and we've talked about it on this show before, is that the Conservatives have a very direct-to-voter, system that they use for identifying vote. And every night they've been doing 2, probably 3 of these Facebook town halls. They're focusing them right in on those voters, probably street by street, postal code by postal code, talking to them, trying to encourage them and get them out to vote. And so, they have run a kind of quieter campaign maybe than we're used to in the past, but I don't know that it means that they aren't identifying their vote. And again, GOTV will be so important, and if it's this close, it's going to be make or break.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we all know that the Conservatives have the most, call it, superior get-out-the-vote machine. However, as we have talked about a million times before, that's still in ridings that they can only win once. And, it's going to come down to that on Monday. I've been quite blown away at the number of people who have voted in the advance polls, and also the number of people who are doing the mail-in ballots. In my riding the other day, there was probably a 100-person line on Monday night for the advance polls. I've never seen that before. So maybe what everyone's saying about turnout is wrong, and if there's high turnout, that is better for the Liberals than it is for the Conservatives.
Sure. Just obviously the Liberals are not done yet with pointing out the shortcomings of the Conservative leader. And one thing that happened yesterday was the Chief Medical Officer in Alberta saying, yeah, guys, we really screwed up by having that COVID's over summer. It was.
And now it came out that Jason Kenney's going to put in a vaccine passport now.
Right. But identifying Jason Kenney as the kind of leader that Erin O'Toole would be, I think would be that Trudeau tried to make that link yesterday, and the day before he'd said, vote Liberal if you want this pandemic to end. And it sounded arrogant, and it sounded almost outlandish, like the other two parties would prolong COVID somehow. And yet, the next day, there's Kenney, and Alberta's in real dire straits, and he managed to link O'Toole and Kenny. And it does strike me that an ad featuring the two men together would be apropos at the moment.
Well, and let's keep in mind that Jason Kenney was a big supporter of Erin O'Toole's for him to become the leader of the party.
Right. So there are plenty of pictures. The other thing I noticed, our friend Jerry Butts just tweeted about, saying that the First Minister's meeting under O'Toole, the first casualty would be a pricing of carbon. And he's probably not wrong on that, do you think?
I would say so.
That would be among the first. I mean, I think the Liberals have a chance these next few days to remind people about a lot of things they're going to lose at that First Minister's meeting. And carbon price, sure, that's going to be one. Serious action on climate change. But I can't, I've got to think that this childcare issue is resonating with women in a way that maybe it hasn't ever, in an emotional way, because they feel like they were so close to getting it done at least 2 times in my lifetime. But also in a very real way after COVID, after what COVID did to women's participation and income in the workforce. I've got to think that's weighing heavily on women's minds when they go to the poll.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember writing about it when the platform came out, saying that they're going to regret ripping this up, because when you look at the amount of money they've committed to replacing it with, it's about 1/10. And while it offers choice, it doesn't create new spaces. I do think that will come back to bite them. But whatever happens, this is not the election that Justin Trudeau envisaged. And I think we're in agreement that a minority is the most likely. And I wonder what you think will happen to Justin Trudeau if he comes back with fewer MPs than he went in with. Marcella?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, look, he's one thing he has been, he was good at, right, was recruiting a lot of great candidates that ran with them in 2015. But his caucus management feels like it's been rocky the last few years. So, will there be the day after a kind of outright call or, signs that people are positioning to get rid of him? I mean, I doubt it. They're going to want to, if they are in pole position, they're going to want to be supportive enough so that he can govern. So in some ways, a minority government can stave some of that stuff off, even if it hasn't been a stellar campaign, because they still are going to want to govern.
Well, I'm told that the cabinet was behind him, including Christian Freeland, so I don't know where the pressure will come from, but I do think there will be pressure, don't you, Andrew?
Well, we'll see how the whole thing rolls out. I mean, where does the pressure come from? Given that the close relationship between the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office, and the Deputy Prime Minister, I don't picture her pulling a Paul Martin. So I don't know where that pressure might come from.
Aside from the media.
Right. Well, I was about to say that, no caucus is ever happy. It's not like Stephen Harper treated his caucus and was sending them flowers every day, or maybe even knew all of their names. No one's ever been like that other than Brian Mulroney. But the Liberals are right now in the beginning of the final chapter of the same Liberal playbook that has been used since the beginning of time. Last night, Chrétien came out. Now we're talking about, you can't vote for the NDP because they're going to get you Conservatives. I'm sure Paul Martin will be out soon. The reason it's the same thing all the time is because it often works. The guns, we threw out abortion, that didn't go anywhere. We threw out the gun thing, it caught on fire. These things aren't that hard to see where this is going in the last few days, and I don't think that Jagmeet coming out and talking about some boogeyman of making cell phone prices lower is going to make it so that he's got a huge group of people running to vote for him, or his constant talking about going after the billionaires when it turns out that there's only 40 billionaires in Canada.
Yeah, I do think that their revenue estimates are rather rosy. But anyway, I guess we're going to
over $200 billion in spending.
We will see how it all unfolds on Monday, and then we'll be back to pick apart the carcasses probably this time next week. So thanks very much. See you again.